Remember, morning wargaming.
Morning
Warming up.
wargaming.
Morning
Oh, yeah.
wargaming. Morning
remember.
wargaming.
Morning wargaming.
Gaming.
Good morning and welcome to the Hobby Breakfast Show, kicking off your morning with Hobby Chat. Your host this morning are myself, the Mayor, and my co-hosts. We have Onod.
Hello.
Nice delay. And OT.
Hi.
Everyone's favourite member of the podcast. Today we'll be chatting about some news, some hobby, and then we'll be talking about a new mechanic we'd each like to add to Middle Earth SBG.
Beautiful. Right, shall we start off with them with some news?
What has
Here
happened
we
this
go.
week? Oh, are we going to...
Not-
Can we all just agree to rate this week's episode and leave it at that?
Rings of Power.
Power.
I completely forgot that we talked about this.
Yeah.
It's a 3
As
out
I
of
have
10.
said for the last 3 weeks, and then we've had to edit in a chat that we did afterwards.
Yeah.
I rated it 4 out of 10. Yeah.
I mean, we got our wish in that lots happened, but too much happened.
No. We didn't get our wish that lots
No.
happened. You're confusing.
You don't think so?
You're confusing things happening with the appearance of things happening.
This is true.
Only
I think
one thing happens that episode that has any kind of consequence, which obviously we can't say because of spoilers.
Spoilers, yeah.
And I will now have to bleep this bit out. But the only thing of consequence that happened was
He's a mammal with 4 functioning limbs.
it's like someone turning up wearing a Nike top, and you go, "That's the CEO of Nike." Fucking hell! Here we go.
Honest, I'm gonna not talk as much as I want to about this, but it's. But
I mean,
whoever's
most of this has been cut, remember, because it was all spoilers.
Whoever is in charge of the pacing of this season needs to be fired ASAP. I just unbelievable. So
I think what they have to do is they just have to bring in new writers for season 2. Because loads of shows don't have great first seasons and they pick up. You've still got the bedrock of a very good story, and you've still got some characters who can be interesting. They just need to have better pacing and better writing, basically. The only thing that I was disappointed about this episode, because I'm not sure that I was disappointed anymore because I'm not really now expecting that. But some of the visuals this episode didn't look as good.
no.
And it's the one thing this show had going for it was that it looked really nice, and then there was some scenes where you were like, this doesn't look as good. You must have run out of time to do the CGI.
Yeah.
And the blood, so much blood.
Yeah.
So much blood from that little arrow wound.
Did you notice it was a 15 this episode?
Was it? It definitely felt like an 18.
It was a bit. Yeah, there was just a lot of gratuitous violence, wasn't there? And
It wasn't very. Yeah, Lotra's almost. What age rating even is Lotra?
12.
12.
Yeah, I mean,
I think Fellowship might even be
PG.
Yeah. There's just, I mean, even when people die in Lotra, there's not just, gratuitous gore. Seeing blood coming out from behind someone's hand would have been fine for that scene. But no, they had to, show them, shoving their hands into the wound and, the blood just continuously gushing.
I mean, that is what a wound would actually look like.
I'm sure it would have been. I didn't need to see it.
10
It did nothing.
10 out of 10 for wound accuracy.
I just wonder, in general, for the series, if they just overreach themselves a bit by having one too many storylines to try and fit together.
Yeah.
I feel like you could keep Elrond enduring because I like that. Yeah, and I mean, I just don't see what
they should have just made it into a trilogy of films. Because the weird thing is The Hobbit would probably actually be a better TV show.
Because of the way it's structured. Because
it's episodic. Yeah, and then you do this as a bit of a heat. Never mind.
Maybe someone will cut The Hobbit into a
TV show. There is like a hour-and-a-half version cut of The Hobbit.
Yeah. Some bloke called Guillermo del Toro. No idea who he is.
So that's the incredibly interesting discussion of Rings of Power there.
But it's as interesting as Rings of Power, isn't it? Like we've all kind of given up. I think we all kind of wanted it to be quite good, and we were quite positive early on. Like I was listening to some snippets from the earlier episodes a couple of days ago. We were like, yeah, it's not bad, 7, 8 out of 10, and now we're all saying a generous 4. Like what's
in other news then? Some quick model news. They are releasing the new Blood Bowl Amazon team, who I think are quite cool.
Is it the first release of this team?
Yes. Well, I mean,
do look cool.
They used to have like an old metal team like 20 years ago. But this is like the plastic Amazon team. I quite like them. They're like going for like a whole South America kind of like Aztec thing.
Yeah.
They're pretty cool.
I think that's kind of what they're based on. Yeah, they are very cool. I still prefer my third-party miniatures, but no Games Workshop's going to let me play in there with those. So,
I mean, a lot of Blood Bowl happens outside of Games Workshop because a lot of Blood Bowl is like third-party stuff. But weirdly, this is like probably the only game that they do where it's cheaper to buy Games Workshop's actual miniatures.
That's true.
Third-party ones, because you can get the whole team for
£20 or whatever it is.
Well, it's £31.50 from Games Workshop, but then it's like £26 from third-party retailers.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So they look pretty cool. I'm not going to get them because Jesus Christ, way too many Blood Bowl teams that I haven't actually finished yet.
Played with.
That means you are now certain to buy them because that's how this podcast works. Like, before we started the podcast, I said I wasn't going to get the Norse team, and I did. They're still in their fucking box. I've used one bit from the Norse team, which is a barrel, and I'm using it for my fucking Bilbo's party. And I haven't even fucking used it for Blood Bowl. It's just like, they'll be built by 2024. Next episode will come live from the Warhammer 40k escape room in Nottingham.
I will never be going to escape room.
Well, who said you're going by choice?
Well, I will be calling the police then.
This is where we will kidnap you for your stag do and take you up there.
Please don't. That concludes the news. That was interesting, wasn't it? Good. We move on to the lengthy and deserving of time hobby section, which is all the listeners' favourite bit of the podcast.
Is that backed up by data, or is that just a gut feeling?
It's backed up by all the comments that we get.
It's backed up by significant YouTube analytics data. Most people stop watching by the time we're past hobby. You can start us off. What have you been up to?
I've done a couple of Kill Team related things this week. I have played a game, or half of a game.
Wow.
The board, my mate had to leave, and I basically just replaced his models with bases and moved the board into another room. So I'm just going to sit there with my miniatures on and all the tokens and everything until we play next time.
When you say you only played half a game, was that because you ran out of time? You were expecting it to...
We did a lot of the setup before... the day before remotely, where we were just rolling for missions and stuff, built our kill teams. It just takes a while to play. I think the more you play it, we started using like a chess timer, so we each get 20 minutes because it goes Yumi, Yumi, Yumi. It's not like 40k where you do all your stuff in the move or whatever.
Nothing says fun like a chess timer.
Yeah. So it was good fun. My Tau against his Space Marines. He's currently winning. Yes. We played most of our game. We'll be finishing our game next week probably. And in the meantime, I built some Primaris Blood Angels, which I think you both have to admit they look kind of badass. Come on.
They look quite cool. I'll put a photo up for the YouTube viewers.
Yeah. I redid the Sergeant a couple of times because he looked a bit shit the first time I did it. So I pulled his arms off and put different arms on, and I'm really pleased with them. They're very detailed, and I'm a little bit scared of starting to paint them because they're just going to take forever. And I've just bought my and my partner's Burrows and Badgers army. So that will arrive, and inevitably I want to paint those first. So
that's the way of things. Yeah,
my pile of shame is growing.
Those Blood Angels are never getting painted. They're gonna sit in a box, much like my Norse Blood Bowl team.
I'll play them, but they'll be grey.
Yeah, well there you go.
They
will do probably just as well. Are you gonna paint? Do they have like the Blood Angel like sculpted torsos?
They don't have the nipple armor, no. If that's what you're wondering.
What's the
point in having Blood Angels? No, I'm going to model them with green stuff. I'm just going to make them. They're going to be, pepperoni nipples.
Just wanted to make sure that we were getting some nipples in there. OT, did you paint 3 Riv Knights as promised?
I have painted 2.5.
Oh,
which
so close.
Which is way more than I expected. I don't know. I'm going through a weird phase in my painting at the moment. Because like I think previously I've just been like painting what I see and just whacking paint on and moving on from there. Whereas I think with the Riv Knights, it's the first time I've actually like planned it out and thought about it before I've done the painting. So like I've now switched to priming in white because so much of the colours are light colours and things like that. I've never primed in white before, so I'm trying something new. And yeah, I think it feels like I'm starting to, think about painting more, which is nice. But it does also mean it takes forever to paint anything. And like,
I mean, your painting rate is still much higher.
Oh yeah, by my standards. But then like, compared to the, because like, I mean, the highlight for me, in terms of my painting efficiency, was my black Numenorians, which were primed in black. So it means I literally had to paint a bit of silver and then move on. But yeah, yeah, I don't know. I think because after this I'll be halfway through the Knights, and I think I might then try one of Glorfindel or Elrond, having got my eye in with the 6 Knights. So yeah, that's how it's been going. But I mean, this will be a consistent callback. I will be talking about Riv Knights from now until the end of the year, I suspect. So
fair enough. Cool. I have done more painting, but I haven't like finished a model except for this. I don't know what you call it. A paladin. I think it's a paladin, or is it a cleric? Maybe it's a cleric.
I think it looks like a cleric to me.
Yeah. That the little dog cleric for Burrows and Badgers, which means
it's very cool.
I've only got one more model to paint for that warband, which
Can we see your warband? What it is?
You can next week.
Okay.
I'll put up a picture of all 4 of the dudes in that warband because I am painting the last one, and
there's 4 dudes in the warband, just 4.
Yeah, it wasn't quite ready for this week. The last one I'm painting, but the little doggo is quite good. I am not completely convinced that I chose the right yellow. I wanted like a slightly lighter yellow because it was like his main like cloak, but I feel like the Seraphim Sepia didn't look fantastic over the light yellow. It's not like a disaster, but I think basically I'm just never going to paint anything yellow again ever. It's a fucking shit color. But yeah, Yeah, I mean, I was okay with it. I'm not quite as happy with this one as I was with the other dog. Like, I think the Corgi Knight is like by far my favorite, and then the rest of his warbands just isn't quite.
So you've got the rats.
Good.
The rats is one warband.
I've got the rats one warband. I've got this one, which is like a the dog Knight,
the otter,
the dog barrack. No, the otter's in the different one.
Oh, so you got 3 warbands.
I've got 3 warbands, yeah,
Oh,
and I'm considering buying a 4th because.
Oh, fuck me! What's the 4th one going to be?
The 4th one is going to be based on Disney's Robin Hood.
Nice. It's going to have all the characters from that. Like,
well, not all the characters, because like Little John in the Disney's Robin Hood's like a bear, for example. So
you could just proxy a badger or something and paint it. As
well, yeah, but kind of Robin Hood-esque, Robin Hood inspired.
Sure.
There's a few models that I've got my eye on, but the issue is that I want to start a load of other projects.
Okay.
I don't know where
just buy the models, because that'll definitely motivate you to paint them all.
It's true. That is how it works. Definitely always finish every project I start.
Yeah.
I'm going for a slightly different approach to what I normally do. Because what I normally do, letting listeners in and potentially, I think this will probably horrify OT. I have like a monthly budget for hobby of around £50.
Is it cumulative? You have to spend it in the month, or you don't get it.
It used to be you had to spend it in the month, kind of. Basically, I used to get a bus into work. Because of COVID, I cancelled my bus pass, and around that time, I started getting back into the hobby because I'd had like a break for about 4 years. I'd had a break for 4 years, except for like 2 kill teams that I'd built in that time. So over 4 years, the only hobby I'd done was building 2 kill teams for the 2018 set. And then because of COVID, I like suddenly had like more free time, and I was like, I'd actually quite like to get into the painting side of things. And because I wasn't spending £60 a month on a bus pass, I was like, I'll put that into hobby. And I, after COVID, just decided that I keep doing that and not get a bus pass. So I now walk to work, like rain or shine, I walk to work, and then that money goes into my hobby. But I was like, I want to do this. I want to do the next few months a bit differently, because what I find I do is I buy £50 worth of stuff in a month, but then I don't usually do enough hobby in 1 month that it like balances out.
You've never done 50 quid's worth of hobby in a month. I refuse to believe.
No. I very rarely actually paint all the stuff I buy in a month in that month. Obviously, there are some points where I kind of catch up, but then obviously there are always like little bits and pieces that get left behind. Like, for example, the Norse team, for example, hasn't been painted, so that's like sub. So this winter I'm doing something slightly different, where I'm buying slightly more in one go, but then I'm not going to buy anything till March, unless it's like a paint pot, because like obviously if you need a color paint, then that
doesn't count.
But like no models till March. That's the plan. So I've got a few projects I've ordered, but I'm hoping that essentially, if I have multiple projects on the go, because I'm really bad at just doing one at a time, if I'm doing them all at once, there'll always be something I want to do. That's the plan.
You're like a bear stocking up for winter before hibernation.
Yeah, it basically is a hibernation scheme.
Yeah.
We'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
If it ends up being a disaster, then obviously I will never do it again.
Yeah. And if you can't afford to pay your gas bill, you could just burn some Warhammer books or something.
Yeah. And that is a good bonus, because as we all know, burning plastic gives off very good and healthy fumes.
Yeah. You wouldn't have to worry about your gas bill anymore, then.
No, because I would have inhaled so many plastic fumes that I'd be in hospital. And
those are heated. You don't have to pay for the bills in hospital.
It's genius.
It's a life hack. That's another one for the list.
Free cost of living advice. I think that concludes our hobby. I actually probably will have multiple things to talk about next week. It's quite exciting, because I think I will have actually painted more than one model.
You could talk about each
I
model
think
that you painted.
Hype. Good. Right. We're going to move on to our main topic of discussion. Very exciting. It's not a Legendary Legion, thank God. We are talking.
It's just where everybody stops listening. This is audience
I don't
retention
think,
just
I
drops.
don't think anyone actually listens for our takes on Legendary Legion, to be honest.
No.
It's
They are
just,
very informed and educated, though.
they are very informed. That is true. Good. The topic of discussion then is we are going to be thinking about Middle Earth Strategy Battle game, our favourite game, and what mechanics we would like to see in it. I think we can all say before we start that I don't think Middle Earth Strategy Battle game is desperately in need of new mechanics.
No.
It's fine. Like it's probably like in a state where actually it could continue to exist as is with no major changes, and you could play it forever because it's like pretty finely tuned at this point. However,
we're going to try and change it anyway.
I actually have come up with some things which I think genuinely could be interesting additions. So you guys have as well. So that's what we're going to be talking about.
Okay.
All right then. So OT, do you want to kick us off with what you have come up with for your ideas?
Yes, I do. Do you want me to do the shorter one first or second, or do you not care?
Don't care.
Okay. So I'm going to talk about the less interesting one first. To leave room for the
make sure that as full as possible.
Maybe they'll come back. They'll like skip the boring bit and come back
Yeah.
to the more exciting bit.
I won't put in a timestamp though, because that's effort.
The one I'm less excited about. Do you want me to say that again so you can cut and edit it, or should I just keep going?
No,
just keep going.
None of this is
just
getting
keep
cut. None of this is getting cut.
None of it is. No. As long as you don't say anything that is just outright offensive.
We're just going to keep cutting in front of you until we've run out of podcast time.
Onod is Elvish for Ed. No, so Star Wars.
So what were your ideas again?
I really wish I was drunk. Star Wars Armada lets the player with the fewest points decide whether they want to go first or second when they're playing the game. So my suggestion would be, if you have less points than your opponent, I wouldn't let it be first every turn, but it would be like the Palantir, where on one turn in the game, you could automatically win priority. So I think it would be quite, because basically in SBG, you're always incentivized to try and take as many points as you physically can up to that limit. What this might do is give you a little trade-off where, like, if you're running quite a heavy cavalry army, for instance, you might drop a few points in favor of like getting that one turn of priority to make that charge. So like, I think it would be quite interesting. I think it'd be quite difficult to balance because like I have no idea how powerful it would be. But yeah, I think that might just be quite an extra mechanic.
Age of Sigmar has something similar because in Age of Sigmar, it's slightly more difficult to hit points totals because they cost everything with 5-point increments. So in Age of Sigmar, if you're like a certain number of points below, you get like an extra little thing free. Because I think the danger of just having it lower points is
it's a bidding war, isn't
it? 699
points
for a 700 point game.
Yeah.
And then
it's a very big bonus to have versus dropping like a couple shields, you know.
I think the idea is interesting though, if you are like 25 points and then or something like
I think what if it was a trade-off? So instead of whoever has less just gets the bonus, it's like for every, I don't know, you'd have to cost what you think the Palantir is worth, but maybe everyone gets, for every 20 points you have off, you can auto get priority for a turn.
But then my issue would be if it's if both people can get it, you could then have multiple people having the Palantir. Which I think
you just have to then roll off again.
So I think it would just be if you have an amount of points less than your opponent.
Sure.
But yeah,
like in Blood Bowl.
Yeah, like part of the reason I thought about this was like with my Riv Knights list, part of the challenge has been actually making it exactly 700, 650, 400 points. And it was like, in that army, getting priority on one turn is a really big deal. So it might be worth it for that. But yeah, so I think that one's relatively straightforward. My other one is a bit more complicated. It's actually based on something from Watra, and they were called Fates. And I don't know if you remember.
I can't remember
what those were. Basically, they were like things you could take. You paid an amount of points for, and you got like special things. So like one of them was like a Palantir effect, where you could like take priority, or you could increase your hero's resilience, or you could make a formation cause terror, and things like that. So basically, in the Watra rulebook, they had one for evil and one for friendly. Sorry, for the good guys and for the bad guys. And like I've just made a little table of like fates and things that you could put on heroes.
So these things you buy before the game.
Yeah,
it's
so,
like
so
war
you,
gear, right?
It's war gear, but like I've deliberately like I don't know, because when I was thinking about them, it's quite interesting that like I think if you put a more powerful thing on an already powerful hero, it might become too much. So I think I've tried to like tone them down as much as I could.
Well,
so,
you just do the same as you do in 40k, and you say you can only put them on unnamed characters.
Yeah. But yeah, and like I think, for instance, you could at different points levels, you could only take a certain number of fates. So, for instance, like maybe up to 500, you can only take one, and then up to 2 at 1,000 or something like that, just to stop you like stacking one hero really hard. But like an example is just like I tried to like theme them to the different races. So I said like dwarven male would give you +1 defense. If you had like high elf training, that would give you +1 fight and things like that. But yeah,
cool.
trying to think how much they all cost is a bit of is just really hard to work out. So I said like +1 defense. I think normally it's worth between 5 to 10 points. So I said it was 10 points.
5 points, yeah.
+1 fight. +1 fight. I didn't really know. I said it was about 30 points. But I don't really know. Like
20.
Is that a bit much? Because I was just a bit wary.
I think +1 fight is just 5 points. I think it's roughly when they work out heroes.
Fight is really. It depends who it's going on, really, because
this is the thing. If it could go on any hero, say you put that on Aragorn, so you've got fight 7 Aragorn. Like I think that makes.
I mean, I don't think you can do it on named hero. I think if you do it, start doing it named heroes, it makes it too good.
Okay. Well, okay. Maybe that changes it a bit. But then I did something like you could take +1 casting value on a spell, obviously to a minimum of 2+, and I said that would cost about 20. I have 14 of each, so I'm not going to list them all.
List your favorites.
Yeah. I said I created a rule for +1 courage, and I said it was the courage of the small folk. So theme of the Shire and courage, things like that. I said that was maybe again 5 to 10 points. I don't really know. I think again you'd have to cap that at 7 because courage 8 is an auto pass, and that's not good.
Are you giving anyone like do you have any special rules? Like you give someone an item that gives a special rule or anything like that?
So I said I created something called Athalas, which was actually nicked from Watra. Basically, it restored a hero to full wounds, and I said that would I maybe 50 points, 40 points. I don't really know.
I mean, for that many, you can buy like another captain, right? So that's probably.
But then effectively, I was thinking if you used it on like Aragorn or something, that basically makes Aragorn have 5 wounds, and that feels quite.
But that's assuming that he gets down to 1 and then you use it, and it's also assuming. Yeah, that I mean, maybe you don't have to roll for it, but maybe if you could use it on another hero, that would be good.
Yeah, and just think like lots of things like reroll resisting tests for 20 points. I thought about like upgrading heroic tier, and like I said, that was maybe 20 points because like I think going from Valor to Legend and getting the auto pass would be quite a big deal.
It would, and you get the capacity in the warband, which is nice.
I think that in and of itself is a really good idea, actually. Just the ability to upgrade a hero to a different heroic tier is.
Does it become not fluffy then, though?
Well, this was my. But then I thought, like for instance, like that'd be a really good upgrade for Faramir. When like in certain situations, I'd say he's worthy of more than a hero of valor. Like he's hero.
I think the heroic tiers only make sense if you like created a mega army with all the heroes in and of themselves. Like take Surgeon for example. Surgeon, as of the FAQ, is a minor hero, but he's the leader of an entire like elvish like port. So if it's the army of like the Grey Havens, it would make sense for him to be the leader, but he can't now. You have to include someone else. Like, weirdly, if you wanted to only have Surgeon as your named hero, you'd have to take an unnamed captain to be the leader. So I think there are situations where you can say it's not actually that unfluffy to pay a little bit more to make a hero.
Especially if you're trying to make it a themey list.
I guess you just cap it by saying you can't take anyone that's a higher tiered hero than them, so that it's clear that they're the main character in this army, sort of thing.
Maybe it just doesn't affect like how it works in terms of who your leader is, but all the other bonuses you get.
Yeah.
I basically balanced them around like what I could think of the worst, like the most OP scenario, and like thinking about it, if we're saying you should only put them on unnamed heroes, this makes it a lot easier to balance. But like, for instance, I created one that like was Bow of the Wood Elves, and it gives you +1 to your shoot, negative 1 to your shoot value. It gets one better. And I said that was about 20 points, because I was thinking if you put that on Legolas and he's shooting 3 times at a 2+, that becomes a bit problematic.
I think it's worth something very different on different heroes.
Yeah,
for a hero that can shoot 3 times versus a hero that can shoot once, it makes a big difference.
Yeah.
Maybe it costs different depending on the hero tier, or maybe it is just unnamed heroes. But either way, it's a cool item.
I really like actually the suggestion of unnamed heroes. I think is cool, because then I think you can make them a lot more powerful.
And
you can kind of introduce like a build a hero kind of thing, because at the moment unnamed heroes are very bland, and they're like that because really the game is designed for you to take named heroes.
Yeah,
but you could open up it for maybe more like campaign driven games where you want like your hero and they become better, a bit like a scaled up version of Battle Companies.
Yeah. And I like one of them was like Inspiring Presence, or everyone in your warband gets +1 courage for the rest of the game. Like, that was about 20 points, maybe, depending on your warband size. I don't really know. My evil ones were much the same. I tried to make them as similar as possible, because I thought if you were going to implement this into the game, so a lot of them are the same. One was like the heroes causes terror, and I called that Aura of the Nazgul. That was about 10 points, 15 points, about that. Reroll casting. That was what I battled with for a bit, because I was like, if you put that on a Nazgul, that becomes really problematic. So I said it was about 30 points. But
is this reroll casting for all your casting?
Yes. Yeah, you can reroll any spells.
So I feel like the way to balance this for named heroes is just to make it a one-use item.
Okay, so it's just like
Aragorn is fight 7 for 1 fight base.
Yeah.
And Nazgul can reroll 1 casting roll in the game.
Yeah.
And then it makes it so that you aren't like making Legolas like fucking ridiculous and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I actually quite like the idea of only giving them to unnamed heroes and making them. I'd make them much more powerful than I've made them here. But you can say like each unnamed hero can take 1. And they're like an upgrade to make your captains a bit cooler. I think that would work really well.
Yeah, I quite like that, because I've always liked the idea of creating my own captain and giving them a personality. I think the only thing that does it at the moment is the Isengard Legendary Legion. Everything else, the captain is
incentivized to take it, are you?
Yeah, and I think
there's always a better named hero for the similar points cost in almost every army, except for like Numenor or like Arnor, where they haven't really fleshed out the army lists.
Yeah. No, I think it's really cool.
Cool. Yeah, well, I think that works really well. Like, I think the if you put them on unnamed heroes, make them quite powerful, and I think that would work. That would.
If you were creating one Onod, what would you create as a rule for good or evil?
What would I create in terms of something that you could give a named captain, an item?
Yeah.
It's an interesting question.
Also spellcasters as well, because I made some for spellcasters.
Yeah.
I think that'd be cool.
Ooh, what about a staff that has the same rules as the wizards?
What?
Free will a turn.
Free will.
50 points. I think that would be epic.
What would you
a
put
Stormcaller?
A what?
Because a lot of the unnamed a lot of the unnamed wizards get spells which you can't spam deliberately.
Like what?
Because if you could spam them, well, stuff like little Moria Goblin with his like shatter.
Oh
Okay.
yeah,
But for 50 points, you're right.
Okay,
But for 50 points,
50
you
points.
could take like 1.5 more Goblin Enchantments. So you're not able to pump out more of the spell. It's more consistent. You can make it fluffy. Maybe it has a similar effect to Staff, but not quite the same.
I think the way that I would take this idea is fluffy little things that cost about the same points cost as a warrior, and it not being like a massive, like completely changes the way your army works, but more of a like it gives you like a nice little thing, and it's like an interesting option, and it makes you think about taking it rather than one. Like I'd be thinking like the Uruk-hai have their like drink, which they like give to Merry and Pippin, like a 10-point thing that you can give to like a captain that means that like once per game they get +2 to their fight value, and it's like they drink that and like they suddenly like have like that energy burst, just so that it just like gives you something that's like little fluffy. It's like makes an unnamed hero potentially have like utility, that sort of thing. I don't know if I'd go down the route of trying to make an unnamed hero as good as a named hero, because I don't think that's the intent of the game.
I mean, I think like with these, I was deliberately like they should be quite weak because you don't want to break the game. And I was just aware with some models, if you change like one stat, like I for none of them I put an extra attack on, because I think if you upgrade some heroes to have an extra attack, you just ruin the game. So I think you would have to be careful. But yeah, I feel like customizing unnamed heroes to make them maybe not as powerful but a bit closer to the named heroes would be cool. You
could shore up some weaknesses then as well, because some things like some captains, I'm trying to think which ones, but a lot of their like strength values are often still like just shit. So like if I could have a burly Goblin Town captain, that would be nice. Just if you could have one more strength.
That you're at scout captain, you can take a 2-handed weapon. You can give him burly or something. Cool.
Give him burly. Yeah, that'd be nice.
That would make Lurtz's scouts better.
It would make Lurtz's scouts better. It would. Burly, because you don't take a 2-handed weapon on a standard captain because that's just stupid. So yeah, give him burly. Brilliant. Makes sense. In fact, just allow me to take that on all my Uruk-hai, please.
Wow,
that's how to improve the game. Just buff
Isengard. That's what we really need.
That's what we need. Good, right, Mayor. You have come up with, from what you were hinting at, quite a comprehensive idea.
I kind of fleshed it out. I fleshed it out mainly because I know how it would work, and it already works in other systems. I have another small one that's just very quick. Unless you have a terrain-based one, Onod, I'm just going to have an honourable mention. No terrain. Okay, very quickly then. Lots of races obviously have special rules for terrain. Some legendary legions have it, like the Uruk-hai Scouts. There's lots of stuff with woodland creatures, cave dwellers. But the problem is, if you go to tournaments or your mate's house, often the terrain, having that rule is pointless. The terrain won't reflect it. Your woodland creature doesn't matter. Your cave dweller doesn't matter. So I think it would be cool if, similar to Age of Sigmar, your army, if you play Wood Elves, you have to bring a tree base. So like a terrain feature that is compatible with your army's rules. So maybe Isengard would be like, I don't know, the mills or something, or a birthing pit, or elves would be a forest. Gondor would be, obviously they don't have a special rule around terrain, but they could bring some runes of Osgiliath, something that will tie into the theme of your army as well, so that the board will at least partially reflect what you've brought. Obviously, that might be a problem if your tournament organizer only has desert terrain boards and you've brought like some trees or whatever. But I think it's a shame to not be able to utilize your army special rules, and that would be a nice thing to see.
Yeah, as you say, that's like a really normal thing in Age of Sigmar now, where they all get like 80% of the armies get a free piece of terrain. And as you say, it's because a lot of these rules make you pay points for stuff, which you then don't ever get to use because 90% of the boards don't have your rule. Yeah.
So that's that one. The second one is a command point / stratagem type thing. The reason for this is I think there are lots of moments in Middle Earth SBG where maybe you feel a little bit helpless in that your warrior has, stumbled over something, or the one roll that you could have done with going well but has completely screwed up your strategy. And while that's a big part of the game, which is fine, it often detracts from the overall game, or it can just be a niggle, essentially. So the way I want to pitch this is to create moments of character in the games that reflect upon the army. So each player will start with, for example, 3 command points, and at the beginning of each turn, if your leader is alive, you get an additional one. And there could be other ways of getting command points during the game, like if one of your heroes kills an enemy hero, you get a command point. And there could be faction-specific ones. So you can spend your command points throughout the game on strategies. There are some universal ones, a bit like how you use might points. For example, some universal strategies could be costs 3 CP, declare that you're using this before rolling priority, you win priority automatically. A lot like the Palantir. So that would be 3 command points. Inspiring Presence, 2 command points. After a roll-off has taken place to determine who goes first in a heroic move, shoot, or combat, re-roll the results. So in that one move off that you allegedly lost the game on, there is, if you're saving your command points, you can try and affect that. Hero in the Making, modify the dual roll of a friendly non-hero model by +or -1. So you can use these command points to affect essentially just foot troops or cav or things that don't usually have access to be able to modify their dice. I also came up with some faction-specific ones. I'll be very quick. I'll just choose a couple. Let's have a look. So one for Isengard could be Wall of Pikes once per game. So you can't totally abuse this. 2 command points. Declare you're using this stratagem at the start of the fight phase. This stratagem affects any fight involving at least 2 Uruk-hai warriors supporting with pikes and an enemy cav model. The enemy cav model counts as not having charged this turn. So bear in mind that a lot of Isengard players don't really take many pikes, but they're like a big part of the movie, and there's nothing really that pikes can do to affect a cav charge in the game as it is at the moment, but that will encourage you to take pikes to actually help deal with cavalry, and it's a once per game. There are ways around it, and it's not too powerful. Khazad Doom, dangerous over short distances. Declare you're using the stratagem at the start of the move phase. Select 1 non-hero infantry model and add 2 to its movement for the rest of the turn. Just like little things that you can use in your utility box. This is probably my favourite one, Moria. We will swarm over them. Once per game, 3 command points. Declare you're using the stratagem at the start of the fight phase. Place all friendly non-hero goblin miniatures to one side who are slain this turn. At the end of the turn, roll a d6. On a 4+, that miniature moves back onto the board from any table edge. So I just think there are so many things you could come up with to allow players to create little unique moments in games that just make them a little bit more fun. I'd really like to hear if you two have any ideas for your favourite factions.
So this is something very interesting because the stratagem idea, which 40k does a lot is something which, when it was introduced, I thought was a really cool idea. And I now...
why I've lost interest in 40k.
And I difference here, right? There is somebody who plays SBG a lot more frequently, goes to tournaments, and I don't.
Does quite well.
I think turn off casual players, because I think what they introduce is they introduce hidden rules which you have to spend time remembering. Now, I think I agree. It creates cool moments. It's in some ways very elegant to stuff like you're saying with the pipe. But I think that it causes more issues than it solves. Slapping like a load of extra stuff to remember on top. So
I agree.
It's a tricky one, isn't it? Because it's a kind of like it, in many ways, is so good in terms of it gives so much utility to a game. Like in 40k, like if you understand how stratagems work, and you put in the time to remembering in 40k how every single faction stratagems work, you like can like master the game. But then for like somebody who doesn't remember it all, you suddenly get like a stratagem where you're like, I hadn't expected that. And it's like a case of like, so like say OT, for example, is playing his Riv Knights. He's playing against an Isengard list. He doesn't realize that stratagem exists.
Yeah.
He charges his knights in, and then he gets screwed.
I totally agree, and you're spot on with your analysis of 40k. It's very much a game you win by knowing your opponent's army, and Lord of the Rings at the beginning of the game. Obviously, I've played so many games where I've not played my opponent's army before, and it literally takes them 5 minutes, and I know absolutely everything I need to know. There's no surprises. I think that's genuinely one of the beauties of the game. And you're right. Potentially, if you take away the faction element of it, and maybe it would be better to have like just the generic stuff.
Well, it doesn't need to be generic, because I think all you have to do is you just have to say, and this is I think what a lot of people want to do on 40k, is in your army building section you have to pick the stratagems, and then I think the idea is fine. Yeah. So you say you have like a list of you can have a list of 5 stratagems every army, but you're only allowed to pick 1 generic one and 2 specific ones to your army.
Yeah.
And then you have them on some cards, and then at the beginning of the game you say these are stratagems I have, and then I think that solves that problem, and I think that would solve that problem in 40k as well. But I think it's just like with those ideas where you suddenly introduce so many special rules to a game which at the moment is very special rule light, you just got to be kind of. I think there has to be something which kind of makes sure that it stays in the spirit of the game. So that would be all I'd say. As long as you have it in the army building phase and you say, these are the 2 or 3 stratagems I have with my army.
Yeah. So you buy the stratagems beforehand.
Yeah,
and then as you say,
it means that you can actually build an army which, in many ways, it's kind of like they could have done that rather than a Legendary Legion, right? Because it's kind of a similar idea. It's just what you're proposing means that you can make it more customizable, whilst Legendary Legions are very, very narrow and strict.
Fixed and themed, yeah.
I think it's part of the reason why you and I, Onod, don't like the Hobbit as models as much. It's just because they've got more special rules and things like that, and I think part of the beauty of certainly the armies of Lord of the Rings stuff is it does feel perhaps a bit more straightforward than some of the Hobbit miniatures which have more special rules. And there will just be some special rules that I won't have interacted with because I don't collect Hobbit and I don't have the book. Well, I do, but it was in German.
Yeah, because this is like what we discussed about, where it's like in when like Lord of the Rings was first being made, it was like Aragorn gets like a very elegant rule of he gets a free might point and everyone can understand it. And then like some of the newer models, as they're like starting to obviously run out of original ideas, start to get more and more complicated rules to remember. Dragon Emperor. it starts to become a bit more like, oh my god, you need like an entire page.
Yeah.
And
Well,
anytime you play against a Dragon Emperor, if you aren't familiar with his rules, I think you're going to be like spending like a good amount of the game trying to understand what he does rather than actually
and how to kill him,
how to deal with him.
Yeah.
And I think
I think your stratagem thing, I think it's interesting the angle you're coming from, because I think if you put those stratagems into the game, I think it would make already good players better, and I think it would make all like less good players worse, because I think they're inherently very skill testing, because like it's not only knowing which ones exist, it's knowing when to use them. And like I think my slight worry with them is that you're kind of reducing the variance of the game, which makes it harder for people to like get a surprise win. So like I think somebody who really understands the rules and the way they were written, it just makes them a bit more likely to
they
win.
can utilize these to their advantage, whereas the newbies might be like, well, I don't really know how to use that properly. A bit like Magic. Like I've stayed away from Magic forever because of that exact reason. It's like, if you're good and you know how to use it, then great. I think
it was one of the points we made about Rides of Theoden, is that like if you're a good player and you understand how to use Cav, the army's really, really good. Like it's whereas like I think if I took Riders of Theoden to a tournament tomorrow, I'm not. I think it's still really solid, but I would do nowhere near as well as a like much more experienced player, just because with Cav, because you have fewer models and because it's all about that big death turn and lining stuff up. My slight worry would be that whenever you reduce the variance of the game, it does just make it more likely that the better player is going to win. And like maybe that's a good thing. Maybe we do just want like the best player to win all the time, every time. But
I mean, I feel like it's already at the stage, so taking it further, like you said, might be a bit much. In that, you know, J Claire will take a shit army and do really well with it, and beat a player that's looked up a net list that's allegedly won some tournaments and do rubbish with it because they don't know what they're doing. I mean, perhaps.
It's good that like it's clearly a very skill based game. Like that's a good thing. But then I just worry that you would reach the point where like the better players always going to win just because like they understand the game so much better, and like the stratagems I think would contribute to that.
And that's where 40k is, where the bloat's got so much that it becomes a case of you can kind of sometimes I think win just because you are better at remembering the game than actually playing it. But that's where you have to really like finely balance it, right? Where it has to be like you can't introduce too many stratagems, but you've got to introduce enough that it's flavorful and fun. It's tricky. Stratagems are a really good idea. I think when they were to 40k, everyone loved them, but now they've become like every army has like 20.
There's too much.
My god. So I think it's like an idea that has to be really carefully managed, doesn't it? But it's good in principle.
I think
maybe like trial it at a tournament or something. Like maybe like I'm sure no tournament organisers are listening, but like if you did like come up with some nice, come up with some sample ones and just try them at a tournament, because it's like the oaths thing. Was it Ardacon? Like again, that's another thing that is really skill testing, and I'm sure in like really competitive tournaments where those kind of things
really matters.
Super important. Like that,
you could always attach stratagems to specific scenarios. So that it's like this scenario, you have like an attacker and a defender, and then it means that.
So in Reconnoiter, everyone gets a free hero march every turn, so you can actually get across the board.
You could redesign Reconnoiter so it's rather than both teams are trying to get off, one team's trying to stop them, one team's trying to get off, and you make it a bit more asymmetrical, and then you balance it by giving them special rules. But obviously, that's like a different sort of game, isn't it? Whilst at the moment,
bolt action does that. Bolt action is like attacker, defender, and often, depending on what list you brought, it's another thing that could just shaft you over a little bit. But I mean, maybe if it goes the more generic route and there's only genetic strategies, and like you said, you take them before the game. I mean, I've got this is probably my favourite one, and it's the most themey one. Originally, I did it for Rohan, but it's 1 CP, and at the beginning of the move phase, you choose 3 mounted non-hero models, and they count as auto-rolling a 6 for any leap tests that turn. Like, it just, I don't know. I mean, it's borderline pointless, really. But it seems cool from a thematic point of view. Like 3 of your horses, you know they're just going to jump over anything. I mean, they could ignore difficult terrain or something, maybe. I don't know. But like, I just think it would be maybe you only use it for thematic games rather than match play.
Sure.
And you use it to create thematic moments as opposed to abuse from a competitive point of view, where like OT was saying, the good players get better and the bad players get worse.
Because there's a really interesting like balance conversation here, isn't there? Because like there's balance at this really high competitive level, but then there's also like making sure that it's still, because like the part of the issue with 40k is whenever I hear you two talk about it, the number of rules and stuff, like I have zero interest in spending, I don't know how many evenings it would take learning all those rules to just be able to play the game. Whereas like for like those high level players, I'm sure those stratagems are really cool and they're like, oh yeah, this makes my army win.
That's exactly what it is. It's like for people who are really invested, they love stratagems because it's means that you can like pull off some really complicated and like niche arm combos. But then from like a casual perspective, like back in 5th edition, you with no interest in 40k could jump in because it was just universal special rules, and it was like they all do the same thing, and we could just say to you what they mean. But if you as a casual player just wanted to jump in and you picked an army that me and Mayor didn't know about, we'd be like, we're gonna have to read through an entire codex, and like the rules block is something which Middle Earth doesn't have, which is like really nice. It's like a bit like Blood Bowl. They've both kept very kind of, which is I think kind of why I like them more than other Games Social games. They've kept very true to their original selves.
But actually, a point you said earlier, like if they exist, you don't have to use them. So like if you want to, I don't know, put them in, maybe not like a match play guide, maybe you create like a stratagem codex or something.
Another book.
You could put them into open play and actually give a reason to play that.
Make them free online. Make them free
open
online.
Play could be good.
Because open play is like an idea where it's like you just throw down some models, but no one ever plays it because it's like there's no reason to play it. So if they actually invested some time in it, and it's like, because I think the new battle hosts are like the perfect chance to do open play right, where it's like rather than like people spend a load of time like building armies, you just like make the rules fun and you just throw them out for free, and there's no points. You just play what you have.
You just want everything to be more vague, don't you? You just want models on a board, no rules, just in a battle.
Make the rules up yourself,
and someone wins. And perfect. Yep. Cool. Right, we'll move on to mine. I took a very different route to both of you.
Oh, for God's sake!
I really did not really introduce anything new to the game. Instead, mine are more kind of they just use the rules, but then things which I feel like the game is missing and which the game would benefit from using the regular rules. So I haven't gone for like a bolt-on rule. I've more kind of slightly manipulated the rule and just kind of like added to it. So the first I've got 2 ideas. The first one is a new heroic action, which is something which I think makes no sense to not have in the game based on what's already there. So you know how if you lose priority,
I know
you have a solution, right? Your hero can
concede.
Concede.
You can bring Saruman so you can use the planting. You call a heroic move, right? And then it's a question to the opponent of you spend one of your resource points, your might, to counter it to try and keep priority, or you concede that hero and everyone within 6 inches gets priority, essentially, right? Yeah.
With you so far.
There is nothing in the game, though, for when you don't want priority. But there are situations, right, in the game where you win priority and you go, I didn't want it because of the scenario or because of the way that charges work.
Definitely.
There's that move. Why is there no heroic action where you can take away priority?
Because it wouldn't be very heroic.
Also, what would you call it?
Well,
heroic apathy?
No. No, I have called it heroic patience.
Oh, fuck.
Fuck you know.
I don't see, though, but from a rules perspective, I think that if you have a heroic move, there should be the counter to it.
Heroic don't
because there are
heroic anti-move.
There are situations, though, in the game where you don't want to have priority, and if you can manipulate with might points to essentially gain the effective priority for hero and everyone within 6 inches, I think you should be able to use your might points to do the opposite and say my hero and everyone within 6 inches doesn't get priority. And if you think about it, it's actually already completely balanced, because if somebody charges you when you've called this, then you lose the ability and you've wasted the might point.
Yeah.
So
you're hoping that
it's asking the opponent a question of, let's say, for example, you have a load of cav models. You didn't want priority because you wanted your opponent to move on to the objective so that you could then get the charge bonus. One of the instances where you don't want to win priority, you get priority. You don't want to move your cav forwards because then you don't gain the charge bonus.
Yeah.
You call heroic patience. It's balanced, though, because the opponent can then go, aha, I just won't.
Patience as well.
No, they just go, aha, I don't want to move on to I just won't move. And then you waste a might point doing something which doesn't affect it. But yeah, you could also have a patience off, like you have a move off.
That was my concern. As you were saying it, I was thinking, well, what if on one area of your army you want to heroic patience, but then on the other one you want to heroic move, and it gets very complicated.
I don't think it is that complicated. I actually think that this is very easy for players to just think this hero has a heroic move, because you say that, but what if 3 characters call a heroic move and then you have to do them all in order? We manage that just fine.
What if they call heroic moves and heroic patiences?
Yeah, but
what
think
order
about,
are you?
Think about the move off.
Yeah.
Say, for example, you have 4 heroic moves in a turn.
Yeah.
And then you have to move everyone else. We cope with that just fine.
So that's because they're all doing the same thing.
Yeah.
It'll get very hard to keep track of.
Is there a patience? Is there a patience phase, a normal move phase, and then a heroic move phase?
I will concede that it may lead to. It may lead to you needing some tokens just to remember what heroes are doing what. But really, most people use tokens to remember stuff anyway. It's like if you're prone, you have to remember who's prone. I just think from a mechanic side, and that was the idea, a new mechanic. If you have the ability to ignore priority of heroic move, you should have the ability to ignore priority in the other way.
I agree, and I like.
Is it a 6-inch bubble, same as move?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think the manipulation of the turn you have to be able to do it the other way, because otherwise the randomness can be counted in one way, but it can't the other.
I have a fix for this. So, rather than whoever gets priority goes first, it's whoever gets priority chooses who has priority, if that makes sense. So if you win the roll-off and you don't want to move first, you give your opponent priority, because on the one hand, they get to move first, but the downside of that is obviously they get to choose combats and other things. So the fact that you're giving away priority overall is a mixed bag, but if you really don't want to go first.
The only reason that I think heroic patience is better than that is that you have to spend the might point. Because I think the reason why at the moment it makes sense that the person who wins always goes first and doesn't get to choose is because the randomness therefore gives purpose to the heroic move. Yeah. And there's therefore the cost benefit weighing up that you have to do. There's the risk reward. Whilst I think if you give the person who wins something randomly the ability then to choose, it takes away the agency of the players and the purpose of the might points.
Also, like, this would be nerfed to characters who can control priority. So I think you'd have to, like, so
Yeah.
like
not that much of a nerf, because you have to spend the might point.
But like, so for instance, like, I think the three characters spring to mind are Saruman, Elrond, and Balin, who are the three who I can think of who manipulate it. And like, I would argue none of them are currently OP. And like, I think one of the best points of certainly Elrond is those foresight points to move it up and down.
It doesn't need to be a universal heroic move though.
But yeah, that's true. That's true. I think it's not. It was just something to consider. Like, it does make those heroes slightly less good.
What if you gave people another way of losing priority? So maybe like everyone gets to re-roll a priority dice once per game, or something like that. I know it gives less agency, it's less tactical.
Again, though, the reason behind my rule is that if you have a heroic move, I just don't see why you don't have the opposite, because there are situations in the game where you want to be able to determine both things. In one, you're given the ability to spend your might points to determine it. In the other, you're not. And I just feel like that's a weird dynamic where we say in one area you're allowed to manipulate this with a might point, but in another area you're not. And it becomes a case of you can lose the game because of randomness, but in the other hand, you can do something about that randomness and potentially counteract it.
I think you're right, but losing priority when you actually, or gaining priority and having to move first when you don't want to move first, forces a tactical decision on your part as well.
Well, that's why you have to spend the might point, because it's a cost. It's the same as you saying, but losing priority means you have to make a tactical decision. But then I can just spend a heroic move and go, no, I don't. I can actually go first.
True. Yes. Yeah,
it's true. That's my first idea. The second idea, then, very similar premise to Mayor's idea with you get CP. However, I went for the route of, rather than introducing a load of rules, you just take what the game already does and you just bring it with the concept. So rather than it being you use stratagems and things, my idea is that you have army-wide points that you can use instead of Might Will Fate.
Yeah, for like non-hero models.
Not for non-hero models. So the idea is that a Legendary Legion would get 3 points. Historic allies would get 2. Convenience would get 1. And you get nothing for the
red one.
Impossible. You can use these, but they will be gone once you use them. So, for example, and this is the reason why I think this is a nice idea. Let's say that you're playing the Fellowship. Merry and Pippin don't have any might points. Let's say that there's a situation where you can use a might point to win a combat and they do something heroic. You could use one of your army points as a might point. It's depleted, it's gone. It gives the ability, though, for models like that. Or let's say, for example, there's a situation where a model with really low fate, you just want to give them a little bit of a extra kind of like, there's one more opportunity. And I don't want to give away so many that it's like you just suddenly turn the game into like you're re-rolling everything and everything's going absolutely crazy. But it's like just that little opportunity to say a more historic army gets just a little buff, and you can use them on some heroes. Like there are some heroes, like when I was looking through and I was coming up with this idea, the hero that kind of inspired this was Gildor Inglorian, because Gildor is a really weird character, because I think Gildor has access to 3 different heroics or something like that.
Yeah, but he's got 1 might point. Yeah, he's got 3.
He's got 1 might point.
Yeah,
right.
3 heroics, 1 might point. Yeah.
So you've got a character where you're saying to the player, And I get that there's a decision-making aspect to this where you're saying, okay, he's got lots of options.
He's got 4.
He's got lots of options, but you have to make a decision. So Gildor can heroic channel, he can heroic resolve, he can heroic march, and he can heroic defense. He's only got 1 might point. So I was kind of like, okay, you can't just give Gildor more might point because then it destroys his character. But you can say, if you take a Rivendell only army, you get 3 might points that can be used across the whole army, or 3 war points, 3 fate. Like, they can be used for whichever heroic. It serves the same purpose as a command point in that you can do a little bit extra, but it fits within so it doesn't complicate things to the player. Because all they have to do is they just need to keep 1 die got. They don't have to remember all the stratagems. The other thing that inspired this idea was looking at characters like Círdan, for example. I was looking at a Rivendell army. I don't know if you can tell when I was coming up with this, because me and OT are going to be playing a doubles event, and so we're trying to work out what we're going to do. In the end, I've not gone for Rivendell army, but anyway.
What have you gone for?
I'll tell you later. But Círdan has Círdan again brings up a really interesting conundrum, right? Which is that Círdan has 1 might point. What are you going to use that might point on every single game you ever play Círdan?
Channeling.
You're going to channel his blinding light.
Yeah.
So what's the point in him having like what you there's so the only scenario you wouldn't do that is if your enemy doesn't have shooting. Every other time basically you're going to do that. Yeah. So it's like it just actually means that you can do something with these heroes where they actually serve a purpose, or it means that like some of your 0 might characters you can potentially do something with because they're heroes, but then they don't get access to any of the heroic stuff. I just think it does the same as a CP, but it gives a little bit more potential. So that was the idea.
I think I like it a lot more than my idea, actually, because it's a bit more versatile. It's simpler, like you're saying.
Yeah.
And I think the only thing you'd have to do is potentially for some of the legions, it might be a bit too powerful. For example, I'm thinking Return of the King. Having an extra, essentially 3 might to disperse between Aragorn and the King of the Dead might be a bit much.
So it's very straightforward, isn't it? Because you can just include a number where you just say this is how many you get. You could even balance it, and again, I think that this then becomes a very elegant solution. Because you remember last episode when OT was complaining that you can't make every army on a completely even footing.
Yeah, now you can balance it with these.
Now you can balance it because you just say ruffians are shit. They get 10 free.
10.
Yeah.
And it just is like such an easy solution to balancing all the armies. And like I'm not actually of the opinion, as I established last episode, that ruffians should be good. But if you are going down the route of you're going to give them legendary legions, so the aim is clearly to give them rules and make them playable, then this just becomes a really easy way of going. You take this army, they get this many. If you take them in an alliance, then they might just
three. That's flat. You get 1, and if you go impossible, you get 0. And it also gives
like a way of going to like tournaments rather than just banning impossible allies. You can take them; they just won't be as good as everyone else.
Yeah, I agree, and it definitely discourages taking non-fluffy lists that are only. I mean, I don't see why you take a non-fluffy list unless you're trying to break the game. Like if you took a Shade with Goblin Town or something, which is why they made it Impossible Allies. But
then you just go, okay, but you're going to be missing out on Angmar would have got 4 free points that you can use with them. And that might be really good for Angmar because they actually have quite a lot of heroes who don't have access to some of the key heroic stats, which would be really useful. Like Gullivar, for example, has no fate. Well, if you took a pure Angmar list and you didn't try to exploit the game, you can now use a couple of your points on making sure Gullivar is actually not going to, have that week. Obviously, it it would require work to balance every single army.
I was going to say because some things are balanced to have like no fate or something, and suddenly you give it 3 fate, and you're like, oh shit, now that unit's really good.
And there are certain units where I think it does actually break them, and I think then you just have to have a caveat where you say
this unit can't use it, or
this unit can never use a might point. Because the one example I thought of who would kind of break this is the Balrog.
Yeah, because he doesn't have any.
The Balrog has no might and he has no fate.
Yeah, and there's a reason for that.
He's got 10 wounds.
Yeah.
Or, for characters like that, you just put a star next to their might, and you just say this character can never use a might point, and there's no complication there. There's no like added like burden of having to remember something. It's just you just go, he just can't use that might point.
I'm going to be picky and say for the Balrog, it's also you want to say fate points as well, because the King of the Dead won't be able to kill him if he passes the fate. But yes,
that's fine.
Asterisk next to name, can't
and it's fine. And it's nice and simple.
Yeah, I agree.
That was my idea. Yeah,
I really like it. Yeah.
I think you just have to be really wary, because like I think the particular ones who are springing to mind are like the one fate good heroes, like say Gil-galad and Durin, like
or like
I mean particularly Durin, like he's D9. Like if you start giving, but then I agree, like you could find a way to balance it. I just think it would be
the only reason though
long process.
The only reason though that I don't always like those one fate heroes, like let's take Theoden for example. Theoden's given one fate because he dies.
Yeah.
He's an old man when he dies.
Old age is coming for him anyway.
The vast majority of his life, he didn't die in.
Yeah, it's true.
Why should he only be one fate?
Why is he punished for just dying on screen?
Like you punish characters who die on screen. Gil-galad fucking survives like 2 ages of the entire universe, and because he dies in one battle at the end of the Second Age, he is permanently punished in the game and has one fate. And it's like, actually, why shouldn't you say this just, if I'm taking a pure Rivendell list, the vast majority of times that Gil-galad fought with the High Elves, he didn't die.
He did fine.
So why shouldn't I have the option to roll one of my army points on his fate?
Yeah.
But obviously, it requires balance. But I think that's like a nice, elegant way of putting the idea of command points into a game, which I really like, without the absolute nonsense that 40Ks become.
Yeah.
So
it just inherently like makes you think about how much each of these points are worth for different lists because of the heroes they have access to. Like I would say they're more valuable for like elves and dwarves maybe because they tend to more combat folk. Whereas like I think actually for Rohan, for instance, maybe you could push it a little bit harder because they don't have the as big heroes. I think King of the Dead you'd have to be really careful with because like you give him a few might and it's
sure. And that's where like me and Mel was saying you just put the asterisk. But it just like opens up so many possibilities where you can say like, you know what, actually in a Shire list, let's give them a few points and let's have it so that if you're taking,
you could give them loads because actually like
if you're taking pure Shire, why like let's just have Merwit for like throwing out a will point to get the banner like
every turn,
and like let's just like have like the option to like throw it out there. But you know, obviously it would require balance. So I don't know.
But definitely something that would be accessible and would add something to the game, and like not as complicated and not too complicated, so that I think a new player could pick that up pretty quickly.
Yeah. Love it. Cool. Right. I think that has brought us then to the end. There we go. So next week we are going to be talking about. What are we going to be talking about? It was
we're talking about a unit we've under or overestimated before playing it.
In the meantime, if you have any ideas about Mechanics Middle Earth, drop us a comment. Let us know. We would love to hear about them from you.
Hit that bell.
Hit
Subscribe.
Hit that bell.
Tell us why our ideas are shit and yours are better.
Isn't there like a little thing which I can do for YouTube where it like pops up with like a hit that bell thing?
I don't know. We should just try and piss people off so they comment out of rage.
Yeah. And what a great idea! And what a great idea OT had to give Aragorn 10 might. I thought that was a fantastic mechanic.
The Dragon Emperor now comes free with any Easter.
Yes. And I really enjoyed the idea that in an Eastling's Legendary Legion, the Black Emperor should be free.
Yeah.
Good. And I also enjoyed the idea that Smaug should be free for any force that includes Sauron. Good. And if you have any thoughts about those ideas,
Ding our bell.
Ding our bell.
Hit that bell for more quality content. Good. Oh, right. It's goodbye from the mayor.
Goodbye, everyone. Have a lovely week.
It's goodbye from OT.
Bye, everybody. See you soon.
And it's goodbye from me. We'll catch you next week.